call this January 11th, 2024 Board of Education organizational meeting to order at 7:01 p.m. George, can you take the roll?
Mrs. Bissell?
Here.
Mrs. Cobain?
Here.
Mr. Micko?
Here.
Ms. Stochek?
Here.
Mrs. Hausel?
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Can you please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time of the meeting, we always share our district goals, and I'm just going to remind everybody at the start of the year what the new strategic priorities that we established in 2023 are. They are leveraging and funding facilities, cultivating culture and climate, transforming teaching and learning, and aligning staff and resources. So we will be considering all of those this year as we lead. At this time, we will be taking the oath of office. George, is that you?
Yep. All right, well, congratulations. We have 3 board members that were re-elected to their respective seats. I'll call you up by one, and we'll do the oath of office individually. We'll just go by alphabetical order. So, Mrs. Bissell, you're first. Come up to the podium.
What'd you do?
It's my cues. So, I'll read it to you. Raise your right hand.
Am I repeating?
You can.
What do you want me to do?
Or I'll read it, and then at the end, say I do. So, Mrs. Bissell, do you solemnly affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as a member of the Board of Education of the Strongsville School District, Cuyahoga County, Ohio, to the best of your ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted, during your continuous and said office and until your successor is elected and qualified? If so, please say I do.
I do.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mr. Micko? Raise your right hand. Mr. Micko, do you solemnly affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as a member of the Board of Education of the Strongsville School District, Cuyahoga County, Ohio, to the best of your ability, and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted, during your continuance in said office and until your successor is elected and qualified? If so, please say I do.
I do.
Congratulations. Yep. Mrs. Hausel? You got rid of the boot? I got the boot.
I just gave you mine.
All right. Mrs. Hausel, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as a member of the Board of Education of the Strongsville School District, Cuyahoga County, Ohio, to the best of your ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted, during your continuous and said office and until your successor is elected and qualified? If so, please say I do.
I do.
Congratulations.
At this time, we will elect a board president for the 2024 calendar year. Do I have any nominations?
I have a nomination. Rich Micko.
Rich has been nominated. Anyone else? I have a nomination to make. I want to share something before I do that. For those of you who haven't been around, can I do this? Am I allowed to talk? That are kind of new to following the Board of Education, I want to give a little bit of history in terms of the board leadership here. And I'm going to start 10 years ago, just because that seems like a nice place to start. So I'm going to read your board leadership from 2014 until present. 2014, Carl Naso, President, Richard Micco, Vice President. 2015, Carl Naso, President, Richard Micco, Vice President. 2016, Carl Naso, President, Richard Micco, Vice President. 2017, Carl Naso, President, Richard Micco, Vice President. 2018, Carl Naso, President, Duke Evans, Vice President. 2019, Carl Naso, President, Duke Evans, Vice President. 2020, Richard Micco, President, Laura Hausum, Vice President. 2021, Richard Micco, President, Laura Hausum, Vice President. 2022, Richard Micco, President, Laura Hausum, Vice President. 2023, Laura Hausum, President, Michelle Bissell, Vice President. There are a lot of things that could be said about this list, but I just want to draw attention to two things. One, the number of times two particular names appear on this list. And the second, that every president in the past 10 years has had 1 year to learn the leadership position and at least 1 year to perfect it. So given this information, I'm nominating Laura Hausum.
Any more nominations?
Okay. Since there's more than one nomination, when I call your name, state the person that you want to be president. So just give me a second. Let me write in Laura's name. So when I call your name, state either Mr. Micco or Mrs. Hausum. So Michelle Bissell,
Mrs. Hausum.
Sharon Cobain,
Rich Micco.
Mr. Micco,
Richard Micco.
Ms. Stochek,
Richard Micco.
and Mrs. Hausum.
Richard Micco.
So by a tally of 4-1, Mr. Micco is elected president. Mr. Micco, you want to come and do the oath? Mr. Micco, same drill. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as President of the Strongsville Board of Education to the best of your ability, in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your successor is chosen and qualified? If so, please say I do.
I do.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I'd just like to thank everyone for their support, and I look forward to a robust year. We have a lot of challenges to face. We have a lot of good work that we're going to do in this year, and I look forward to doing it with all of you. Next is election of board vice president. Similar procedure. I'll open it up for nominations. Do I have any nominations?
I nominate Laura Hausum.
Laura Hausum. Do I have any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Haley Stovchek.
So the nominations for vice president are Laura Hausum and Haley Stovchek. Mr. Anagnastu, would you record the tally?
Yep, just give me 1 second. So same procedure. When I call your name, just state either Mrs. Hausum or Ms. Stochek. Mrs. Bissell,
Ms. Stovchek.
Mrs. Cobain,
Mrs. Hausum.
Mr. Micco,
Laura Hausum.
Ms. Stochek?
Mrs. Hausum.
And Mrs. Hausum.
Laura Hausum.
Okay, by a tally of 4-1, Mrs. Hausum elected Board Vice President. So if you'll join me at the podium for the oath of office. Same drill. Raise your right hand. Mrs. Hausum, do you solemnly affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as Vice President of the Strongsville Board of Education to the best of your ability, in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your successor is chosen and qualified? If so, please say I do.
I do.
Congratulations.
Thank you, and I appreciate everybody's support. Like Rich said, I look forward to getting things done this year. Thank you.
So next on our agenda is public comment. Mr. Anagnostou, do we have any public comment?
We do have one. Mr. Mike Contanzarite, 1330 Western Road.
Oh, thank you. Rich, glad you voted for yourself. I was worried for a minute. That's a
So
joke.
was I.
Yeah. So I'm here real quick just for a couple reasons. The first is to generally say how much I personally appreciate all the board work, because I know you're not overpaid for sure, and a lot of times you're really not backed accordingly on a lot of things that you need to do. What I'm referring to is, and why I'm mainly here, is to talk in favor of your levy, but to also apologize, because as community leaders, I guess I would be one of them, we really dropped the ball on supporting that. We thought it was a renewal. We thought it would go through, but it didn't. But the board has done a fabulous job, right? We vote for board members. We elect them. Then they hire fabulous people like George and Doc. And then they come up and they have a big budget windfall, and everybody's mad at them. So I repeat that. They have money, and everybody's mad at them. So we apologize. We're building a group of a pretty strong group of residents, businessmen, and we're really going to come out and help you with this levy. And the saddest thing about it was you were hoodwinked by the Republican Club of Strongsville. They should be ashamed of what they put in writing. I mean, where do they get their qualifications to tell the doc and the finance genius that they don't know what they're doing? Absolutely ridiculous. So we are going to come out swinging. We appreciate everything you guys do. And, you know, really, the positive thing, there's no ill will if you voted no, but we've got to get the right information out. And if you look at the flyers these guys put out, being the Republican Club, they really ought to be ashamed. So we're going to attack that, get them the right information, and we're going to be with you guys 100%. So keep up the good work. And all I can tell you about the Republican Club, the joke in the city is, if you want to lose an election, have them endorse you. So that's what we're up against. That's all I got to say, guys. I appreciate all of you. And that is my twin sister, Sharon. Thank you.
Mike, thanks for your support.
Oh, you're welcome.
I appreciate it.
Proud to be part of it.
I don't think apologies are necessary, but I appreciate.
We dropped the ball. We're in.
I appreciate the sentiment, and I also appreciate the sentiment and want to reinforce our job as a board is to inform the community, and if we do that well, we'll earn their trust and we'll earn their investment. So thanks again, Mike. I am going to beg the courtesy of the board, and we're going to go out of order. And I will turn it over to Dr. Ryba for some timely information.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Micko, and I'm going to pass it on to Jenny to share a distinguished guest that's with us today that we'd like to introduce to the board.
So I would like to introduce to you Mr. Greg Gurka, who is currently serving the role as principal of Sarar Elementary until the remainder of the year. So just a little bit about Greg. He has spent the majority of his career in North Royalton until he recently retired, serving 8 years as superintendent in the district. I think he retired in 2021, correct? But throughout his long career, he has held multiple roles, and one of those roles, teacher, principal, and director of personnel, I believe, as well, and also has been a principal at an elementary school in Avon Lake as well, so does have some experience there. Additionally, his wife is an elementary teacher, MTSS reading teacher, I believe, and she's in North Royalton. He also has children, and so he is a father, he is a longtime educator and a husband, and we're just very fortunate to have him filling in for us for the remainder of the year at Sarar. So thank you, Greg, very much. I don't know, do you want to come up and say a few things? I'll put you on the spot, just quickly.
This is so official. Well, good evening, everybody. It's nice to see you. I'll say I'm honored to be part of the Strongsville schools. As Jenny said, I've had a long career, 35 years now. Thought when I retired, I was retired. That was the goal. That was the goal. But talking to Dr. Ryba and Jenny, it something felt right about coming to Sarar. And while I had doubts before I started, I'm so happy I did. The last week that I've spent there, the staff is wonderful. Your children are wonderful. They're polite. They're eager to learn. They're respectful, and I'm having a blast. Going back to being a principal. So I'm here. I look at my role is I'm here to take obstacles out of the educator's way so they could impact the children, and whatever I can do to help them be effective, that's what I'm going to do for the remainder of the year. So if there's anything I can do to help anyone out with my experience, please do not hesitate to call on me. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Greg.
Greg. We're thrilled and honored to have you a part of the district. We've heard nothing but positive things about the relationships and the work that you're doing there. And as Greg just said, when I went over and talked to him in his first week here, and he said, hey, if there's anything I can do beyond just the principal to kind of help out. So, Greg, congratulations. You're going to officially call snow days this year.
So close.
Consider this.
Thanks again, Greg, for being with us. We appreciate it. Yeah. And when we get to the other agenda, Greg will be on the agenda for official vote by the board. Thank you, Mr. Mickofield. Greg, you're more than welcome to stay, but if you'd like to continue your evening, you're good to go. Thanks,
So,
Greg.
We'll expect you to check the weather, Greg, and then report back whether we have school tomorrow.
I've already heard from several people that next week is going to be really cold, Dr.
I think they need one day off anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next on our agenda is appointment of liaisons to committees for one-year terms. City Council, myself and Mrs. Hausum. Strongsville Education Foundation, Mrs. Kilbane and Mrs. Hausum. Strongsville PTA Council, Mrs. Bissell and Mrs. Kilbane. Ohio School Boards Association legislation, myself. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Ms. Stavcek. Any discussion? Hearing none. George, would you take the roll?
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stochek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Cobain,
Yes.
Mr. Micko.
Yes, and the motion carries. Next is reaffirmation of the second year of three-year term to Polaris Career Center for Mrs. Bissell. Michelle, I know you guys, I know Laura and you had your initial board meeting. This is not our business meeting, this is our work session, but did you have any updates, and congratulations on your reaffirmation?
Thank you.
Michelle was voted in as president of the Polaris Board.
Congratulations.
Yes. And there were three new board members.
Yes, there's 3 new board members, and there wasn't a lot of business on this agenda. It's just kind of getting the year rolling. And then in February, we do meetings with each school. Representative will meet with the superintendent treasurer, and then they usually do a second meeting with the superintendent of the home schools to make sure and keep that communication strong. So that's what's coming up in February. Regular meeting will be then in March.
Thank you. Next is appointment of liaison for 1-year term. This is a vote or an action item. Appointment for Mrs. Hausum to a 1-year term. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? George, would you take the roll?
Ms. Stochek?
Yes.
Mrs. Cobain?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes,
Mrs. Hausum?
Abstain.
And Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
and the motion carries. Mrs. Hausum, do you have any updates on Polaris Career Center?
I enjoyed my first meeting.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I enjoyed my first meeting. They honored a few students from surrounding districts, and we actually had one Strongsville student who was acknowledged. He's in the aeronautics program at Polaris, and he's received a $10,000 grant. And he plans to continue his education at Ohio State. So that was really interesting and fun to hear about what the kids are doing.
Thank you. Board committee appointments for 1-year term. Finance Committee, Mrs. Bissell and Mrs. Kilbane. Policy Committee, Mrs. Bissell and Ms. Stavcek. Facilities Committee, myself and Mrs. Hausum. Business Advisory Council Committee, Mrs. Kilbane and Mrs. Stavcek. Ms. Stavcek. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Ms. Stavcek. Any discussion? Take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Ms. Stavcek?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mrs. Cobain?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes, and the motion carries. Set date, time, and location of Board of Education meetings for calendar year 2024. We all have the attachment, and it is on our computer screen. The only one I will go through right now is that our next meeting is January 25th. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
It's consent.
Oh, it is consent. I forgot. I saw action. I didn't see consent. Good. Robert's Rules of Order. Recommended action. Robert's Rules of Order will be used in the absence of board policy. Establishment of service fund for fiscal year 2025. According to section 3315.15 ORC, the treasurer of the Board of Education is certified that the number of pupils enrolled in the Strongsville City School District is 5,698 as of December 1st, 2023. By law, a sum not to exceed $2 for each child enrolled, or $20,000, whichever is greater, may be set aside from the general fund to be known as the service fund, to be used only in paying the expenses of the members of the Board of Education actually incurred in the performance of their duties, or of their official representatives when sent out of the school district for the purpose of promoting the welfare of the schools under their charge, or in paying the expenses of members-to-be of such boards actually occurred in training and orientation to the performance of their duties from the date of election or appointment to the date or administration of the oath of office. Such payments shall be made only in such amount as may be approved by the board on a statement of several members or members-to-be furnished at the next succeeding regular meeting of such board. No board shall appropriate or expend a sum greater than $60,000 in any one school year. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that a service fund be established by the Board of Education in the amount of $20,000. That is also on the agenda. Recommendation by superintendent authorizing the treasurer to A, reinvest public funds for 2024 in accordance with board policy and establishing admin procedures. Results of such investments will be reported in monthly financial reports. And B, to pay bills within the adopted appropriations. Be it legal counsel appointments, be it resolved that the superintendent of schools and his designee be authorized to contact legal counsel as necessary for successful performance of duties. Legal counsel is designated to be Squire Patton's Bog, Pepple and Wagner, Riley Law Firm, Brinza McIntyre and Seed, Peters, Kalale and Markakis, and Weston Hurd. And that one is a separate action. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Ms. Stavcek. Any discussion? I will share with the public that the reason we have so many legal firms is because each one has specific expertise, and we call on them for that specific expertise, whether it be negotiations, whether it be student legal matters, or what have you. And in this case, whether it be property tax negotiations. So each firm is an expert in their field, and it makes sense for us to call on that expertise instead of just having one general firm. Any other questions or discussion? Take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stavcek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Ms. Cobain,
Yes.
Mr. Miko.
Yes, and the motion carries. Board of Education meeting minutes, provided that the Board of Education members receive the meeting minutes of previous meetings at least 5 or more days in advance of a meeting. Authorization is given for the board to waive reading of the minutes at that meeting. Resolution requesting notification, be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent to approve the resolution requesting that the Board of Education be notified by the tax commissioner of any application for exemption from taxation for any property located within the district. The resolution is pursuant to Ohio Revised Code. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the tax budget for the fiscal year 2025 be adopted. Is this the one you have a presentation on? It's part of the consent calendar, so George, take it away.
Yep, it's just a quick presentation, 5 slides. What the tax budget is, the purpose of it. The County Budget Commission must certify tax rates to each subdivision or other taxing unit by March 1st for school districts under ORC Section 5705.35. And the County Budget Commission is required to issue an official certificate of resources for the upcoming fiscal year. In this case, the upcoming fiscal year will be fiscal year 2025. When the Budget Commission is setting tax rates based on a taxing unit's need, its determination must be based on information the County Budget Commission requesting the taxing authority to provide within the alternative tax budget. This is an annual item that we must approve and submit to the county by January 15th. The alternative tax budget consists of 5 schedules. 1, the division of taxes levied, a statement of fund activity for the upcoming fiscal year, unvoted general fund obligation, voted debt, and tax anticipation notes. The first schedule, the one of division of taxes levied, this is all of our levies that we currently have out there. The first set is the operating fund. The second is when they were last passed. The next column is the levy type. We have 2 renewals. Then the next column is the number of years that they run. So as mentioned, we have 2 renewals, the remaining are continuous. When the tax year ends and when the tax year begins and ends is this column. When the collection year begins and ends, so the difference between a tax year and a collection year, the tax year, the collection year is always in arrears of the tax year. So for example, this calendar year, it's collection year 2024, which we're collecting on 2023 taxes. So for this tax budget, it's for tax year 2024, which we'll be collecting on in calendar year 2025 for next calendar year. This column represents the tax rate that was initially passed. This is the effective rate, what they're currently sitting at, and how much each levy generates. to note, I do have to show, I had to make a note on it for this year, because this is setting the tax rates for tax year 2024. The current renewal levy that we had on the ballot in November, it expires, the tax year expired was 2023. This is the last collection year, so it will be falling off if not renewed. The county did have me put a note on here that the above renewal is set to expire at the end of collection year 2024, and the Board of Education has filed a resolution to place the renewal on March 19th election. So for their purposes, when they do the tax rate resolution that we'll get sometime in February, spring, as of now, that levy will not be included on there because it hasn't passed yet. If it passes by the end of the calendar year, then we'll submit a new tax rate resolution with the county. And to that point, for Schedule 2, it is the first amended not amended, it's the first certificate of estimated resources for fiscal year 2025, which begins July 1 of 2025. And same issue with that is I have to, for that estimated resources, I have to assume that half the renewal levy is no longer there when we do the estimated resources. If it passes, then we'll update the certificate. Schedule 3 is our unvoted debt. We currently have, moving into next year, or as of January 1, we have 2 issues. Beginning of the school year, we had 3. The final payment on the one was December 1st, so that came off. So now we have these 2. One is coming out of the general fund. It's annual amount of principal interest of $78,000. That was for date of issuance was in 2005 with a final maturity of 2035. That was for acquiring school buses at the time and the preschool facility development. And then Fund 3 has the other one for the Muraski improvements that were issued. That was originally issued in 2005 as well, with a final maturity of 2034, and that annual principal and interest is $272,000. The next schedule is our voted debt. We have one. That was the $81 million bond issue that was originally passed in 2012. The notes on the side reflect the times that it's been refunded. Or it's set to expire. The final maturity date is December 1st of 2045, and the annual principal and interest payments are $3.5 million. And then the last schedule is tax anticipation notes, and we have none. So that concludes the tax budget, if there's any questions.
I just want to highlight when you say refunded, a lot of people hear money came back, and that's not what that meant. It would be more appropriate to say refinance.
Correct.
So I just wanted to share that with the public. Any other questions? Thank you, George. Next is Board of Education investments. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the board authorizes the treasurer to invest up to a maximum of 40% of the district's interim funds in commercial paper notes in accordance with Board Policy 6144 investments. And George, would you like to remind the public of our conservative, safe investment strategy?
Correct. So we use meter investments to do our investments. We have a tiered system with, we look at buckets. We have a 1-year space, 2 to 3 and 4 to 5. And we have certain percentages that we like to have in those buckets where as maturities, in a cycle where maturities are rolling off each year over the next 5 years, we can only invest in highly qualified commercial paper or government issued bonds. So that's what they're kind of looking at. We have our long-term funds with meter, our short-term funds in Star, Ohio, and short-term is 9 months or less, long-term is 9 months or more, and then we keep in our regular checking account what we need for the current month to pay payroll and bills. So currently Star, Ohio has an interest rate of 5.64, so we like to keep as much money as we can in Star, Ohio to gain that interest from versus our checking account, while having anything more than 9 months invested with meter.
Thank you. District credit limits, be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that per Board Policy 6423, The annual credit card limits per cardholder and/or account be approved as listed in the exhibit. Travel payment and reimbursements, be it resolved upon the recommendation of treasurer that the payment and reimbursement rates for per diem meals, lodging, and mileage be approved as listed in the exhibit. Mileage rates shall not exceed the federal IRS prescribed mileage rate. OSBA annual membership due and subscription, be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the Board of Education renews its membership with the Ohio School Boards Association, including e-publications, effective January 1st, 2024 through December 31st, 2024. OSBA Legal Assistance Fund, be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the board enters into a contract with OSBA for the Legal Assistance Fund consultant services for the period January 1st through December 31st, 2024. Cost of the service is $250. House Bill 9, Ohio Public Records Training Certification, be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that to be in compliance with all Ohio public record statutes and the Board of Education requirement that the treasurer, George K. Anagnostou, be the designee on behalf of the Board of Education for public records training. Thank you in advance, George.
Now we'll know, now that yourself, Mrs. Hausum, and Mrs. Bissell are in a new 4-year term, that must be done once during every 4-year term, so I'll do it on your behalf. Ms. Stovcek and Mrs. Cobain, I did a records training last year, which would have covered you guys for your current term. So I like to do it every other year, just to make sure everyone's covered.
And although we joke about it, it is very important, and we take the responsibility seriously. Broadcast of board meetings. In accordance with the board policy 0169.3, the board authorizes the public broadcast of regular board meetings during the calendar year. Resolution for group health, vision, and dental insurance for board members. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that board members may participate at their own expense in group health, vision, and dental insurance plans provided to the employees of the district. Hiring authority, be it resolved that the Strongsville Board of Education authorizes the superintendent to employ personnel on a temporary basis between board meetings. This requires a separate action, or is that a typo, or it does require separate action?
We'll do it as separate action.
Works for me. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Ms. Stovcek. Any discussion? Hearing none, take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stovcek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Cobain,
Yes.
and Mr. Miko.
Yes, and the motion carries. Motion to adopt the consent calendar for the organizational portion of the meeting. Public action by the Board of Education and adoption of the consent calendar at this point of the agenda means that all items appearing in this agenda denoted as type action consent, which items constitute the consent calendar, are adopted by one single motion unless a member of the board or the superintendent requests that such items be removed from the consent calendar and voted upon separately. And this requires a separate action.
Well, this is the consent calendar.
Oh, this is the consent calendar. Okay. I thought we were approving the ability to have a consent calendar, which would have been fun. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any requests for removal or otherwise? Hearing none, any other discussion? Take the roll.
It was Mrs. Hausum with the motion and Ms. Stovcek with the second? Okay. Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Ms. Stovcek?
Yes.
Mrs. Cobain?
Yes.
Oh, Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mrs. Cobain?
Yes.
And Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Sorry, switched the order on me.
I wasn't the only one discombobulated. Meeting notification. The next regular Board of Education meeting is scheduled to be held. So is the next one the one we're going to have next?
That's what I was wondering.
Why?
So
The next one. No, there's a
No.
new meeting starting in a minute.
Yeah, so we have there's two meeting agendas for tonight. This is the organizational meeting, and then we have a separate agenda for the work session. The reason for that is with board docs, we can only have one consent calendar, so we needed to parse out the meeting. So our next meeting is to follow this meeting, followed by the
But
next
the only
meeting.
reason we're doing that is board docs.
Board
So
docs,
our
correct.
next meeting is actually January 25th, 2020, 25th, correct?
Correct.
I said that right? January 25th at 7 PM in this room. And we are going through the exercise of adjourning our organizational meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Ms. Stavcek. Any discussion? Hearing none, take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stochek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Ms. Cobain,
Yes.
and Mr. Miko.
Yes, the motion carries. The organizational meeting is adjourned. We are going to take a 5 to 10 minute break, and then we will start the regular meeting. The break to allow us to get organized. I am going to call this January 11th, 2024 Board of Education work session to order. Just in case some of us escaped, Mr. Anagnostou, would you take the roll?
Mrs. Bissell,
Here.
Ms. Cobain,
Here.
Mr. Miko,
Here.
Ms. Stochek,
Here.
and Mrs. Hausum.
Here.
We are all present. Do we have any new public comment? Seeing none, I'll turn it over to Dr. Ryba for superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. Do have first couple items for your consideration. The first is looping back on our calendars. If you remember, a couple meetings ago, we had members of the calendar committee come and present the calendar. Both of those calendar options are there for reference. One of the things we also did is we have a kind of a calendar public forum where parents and staff can give comments and feedback. So what Mr. Anagnostou has on the board, and you have access into your part of board docs, is the survey feedback that we received back. This was in my parent and staff updates, I think for 2 or 3 updates that was present. So just to give you kind of a perspective, it goes out to about a little over 6,500 emails, and we got 55 responses from that. And what we did is go through those responses and highlight in order the themes of constructive feedback on the calendar. So this does not add up to 55 because some people had multiple things they said. Some people said, hey, calendar looks good. This is just for some of the constructive feedback. So you could see the most popular point of feedback we got, which was stated by 21 different people, was requesting the same days off for all grade levels. So you may note from the last presentation, we have 4 days in our calendar where not all the grade levels are at school. So on those times, on 2 of those days, pre-K to 5 are in school and 6 to 12 are not. And on 2 of those other days, vice versa. So 21 people said, hey, we would rather have all kids either in school at the same time or all kids off at the same time. Then it goes down from there, from just 7 people down to 1. The reason you note the 2 green highlights, the first one of requesting the days off for all grade levels, and then the second one highlighted in green says stay in school later and begin the new year later. Those are things that are feasible to do without a lot of negative consequences. The rest of or it's not going to cause new problems that people are not going to like. The other ones that are not highlighted in green all cause different sorts of challenges. So when you see the second one with 7 people that said, hey, we would like a shorter first week and not a Monday start. We typically have started on Wednesdays. Well, if we start on Wednesday, that means we're going to have to go a week further into the summer, which means we're going into June, which nobody wants to go even further into June. We've already extended it beyond Memorial Day. Summer break begins Memorial Day. We could do that, but that means kids are going to come back to school August 14th, August 13th. People have said that's way too early. I won't go through the rest of them, but that gives you the idea of you solve one problem, you create another problem. So I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Micko, for this is the point where, George, if you want to put the calendars, maybe the first calendar on the board, to answer any questions that you may have on the calendars, and we can just go from there.
Does anyone want to start?
Dr. Howard, can you refresh our memories? I think when we discussed this at the previous meetings, you said that there was a special group that met and talked about having the conference days on separate days. Can you just refresh our memories on that?
Yeah, so we have two groups that help support this work. So the first group that we have is that we had was a parent-teacher conference committee. So we decided through our last negotiations with the teachers, in the teacher's contract, it says there's going to be 2 parent-teacher conference days, one in the fall, one in the spring, decided they're going to be evening sessions, half days each, or a couple evening sessions. And we just had the question of, is that still working in 2024 and beyond? So we decided through negotiations not to solve that there, but put a committee together. That committee had administration, teachers, and parents. And from that committee, they recommended the new conference structure, which is that we would have a full-day conference in the fall, followed by a half evening in the fall. They felt like we needed more conference time in the fall. And then in the spring, we would just have a half-day evening in the spring. That's kind of the timing of it. What they recommended is when you do these things, please don't have for the all-day fall conference, please don't put all levels on the same night. The reason being is if I have kids in 2 levels or 3 levels, it becomes nearly impossible to get to all of the levels, especially when you look at the secondary level. They typically have arena-style conferences. So that means I don't schedule it. I go there and I wait a little bit to try and see the teachers I want to see. So their recommendation was, can you please have the full-day conferences on opposite days? When you do that, you really don't have other solutions to do that. So that's why you see up there October 2nd is, just for grades 6 to 12, and October 16th is for grades pre-K to 5. The other challenge that you come to is the timeliness of when the different levels want to have conferences. So at the secondary level, they're on quarters. They said, hey, we would like to have it 2 weeks before the quarter ends. It's slated to end October 18th. That way we can talk to parents if there's missing work or things that need to be cleaned up before the end of the quarter. We have 2 weeks to figure it out. The elementary folks have said, hey, we're doing Ames web testing. We're getting to know the kids. We need a little longer time to get to know them before we have conferences. So they liked it a little later. So those were some of the reasons that the committee recommended that. That recommendation then goes to a calendar committee. A calendar committee has administration, teachers, staff, and parents again. And the calendar committee honored that recommendation, and that's why the conference days were placed on the calendar as they were.
I have a question about that. I understand the timing piece because I looked at, that makes sense. But what I don't understand is the parents being concerned about not having enough time. If you have an entire day, doesn't that become a non-issue?
According to the parent feedback that was on the committee, it was centered around trying to fit scheduled conferences at the elementary level, depending on, and they have recommendations as to how to do conferences, of whether they're scheduled, virtual, between spring and fall. But it became, if in the fall we stick with the scheduled conferences at the elementary level, and that can be kind of tricky as to where you get your spot. And then I have to go to the secondary level, which scheduling it around teams becomes a little challenging. And then the high school, which is the arena style, which takes more time because I may have to wait 10, 15 minutes. So arena style means all the teachers are sitting, waiting for the parents to come talk to them. So if it's a teacher that more people want to talk to, you may be 4, 5, 6 parents waiting to talk to them. It's going to take you maybe 45 minutes to get to that teacher, or I'm going to go to this teacher because they're free. So that was the point of you're running around all day trying to make it work. We had a number of people or number of parents that had 2 or 3 kids that we used to, this is going back to something we used to do. So we used to have these all-day conferences a while ago, and so some of the parents remembered and had kids back then and remembered those challenges, so that's where that was coming from. Yeah.
I do remember that. For 4+ years, I had either 3 levels or 2 levels, and it was like, which kid is struggling more, or what, you're like prioritizing, and I'm interested to see how this works out, if we get positive feedback, that parents can see more teachers.
Anybody else have any questions? So I got more questions about these calendars than I can remember getting any questions about. I can see, everybody's opinion is based on their personal take on it. I was going to suggest, because we did this during the holiday, according to Dr. Ryba, there isn't any time of the essence that we need to approve this today.
No, the only time of the essence is, I would say we would want to approve this no later than the January 25th meeting, just because of work schedules, vacation schedules, things of that nature for families. But there's nothing, other than that, that's the only pressing matter, is being respectful to parents that have to request advanced vacation time.
And I agree, but I was going to see if the will of the board is to let this germinate for the 2 weeks to our next meeting, allow the public any more time to lobby strenuously on why it's difficult or why it's worth trying, and then we have the time to discuss it with the calendar committee if there's any tweaking or any changes, and then we'll be ready to approve it at the next meeting, unless all of you are dying to approve it right now.
I'm okay with that. I just want to draw the attention to one thing. You had that chart up before, and I read each individual comment, and there was a lot of concern about the students being off on 2 different days. So that's the thing that, as we're kind of looking to approve this next meeting, that I really want to carefully consider, because I know there were some angry, comments in there of like, this does not consider the working parent in any way. And I think we need to be respectful and consider those opinions, especially if there's an easy way to fix it, as you've noted.
Yeah. So just for the board, and George, if you can go back to that calendar. So if looking at, pausing until the vote until January 25th, and it seems like besides the stuff we noted of, hey, I'd like to start later and earlier, that really, we've talked about why that's challenging. It comes down to these orange days, right? So you've got, just so you have options to think about, you've got option A, which is just stick with the calendar that the calendar committee recommended, and vote that. And we've, not that it's ideal, but we've done it in the past to say, hey, we're going to adopt both of these, but you as the board have the right to say, maybe 25, 26, we try this, 24, 25, 25, 26, we come back and say, here's what we got after practice, and we want to make tweaks. So we always have that option. But if we want to make any adjustments here, one option would be to say, you solve the October by just putting it on one day, right? You can say, we're going to pick a day for conferences for that 11:30 to 7:30 conferences, and it's going to be on one day. That would alleviate those 2 opposite days in October. So what I will do in the interim, just to be prepared for January 25th, is to talk to the calendar committee and say, hey, if the board wishes to combine these, let's pick a day of what that would be, because we've got divergent needs, right? George, if you scroll down so we can see December and February, there you go, thank you. So December and February are for different reasons. Those are for what are called Records Day. So in the teacher's contract, a Records Day is at the end of a trimester or end of a semester. Teachers have the opportunity to finalize grades and do all of that stuff. So In the teacher's contract, it says secondary teachers will get a records day at the end of the first semester, so that December 20th date has to be there. To make that a full day off for everybody, what you'd have to do for pre-K to 5 is make that a professional development day. The calendar committee said, making December 20th before a long holiday break a professional development day is not a meaningful use of our professional development day. The parents on the committee said, elementary parents on the committee said, hey, having my kids off an additional Friday means I need to take an additional day off before a long break. I like elementary kids going to school on that Friday. Again, it's representative parents, but my middle schoolers and high schoolers can be home on that Friday, and, it wasn't a big deal from their perspective. So that's the challenges with doing that. On the February date, that would be a records day for pre-K to 5, 6 to 12 would be in session. You could fix that by, again, making it a full PD day for everybody. The implications of that is you lose the March PD day. And historically, we all like a 3-day weekend in March for our students because it's a long month. There is such thing as spring fever in schools where kids need a little break, everybody needs a little break. So the March PD day was to just kind of allow for a long weekend in there. So, so as we consider those are the options that we have. Anything else that you have on your mind that you want me to run past the calendar committee or any other committee we've done so I can be prepared with any questions you have?
Will the survey stay up? Like, will we keep asking people while we're?
If you would like me, I've never shut off the responses, I don't think. So if you want me to keep it up, I could put it in the last parent up. I have a parent update going on Tuesday.
Yeah, I like to look at them.
Yeah.
It gives you an idea.
Yeah, we'll keep it open and put it as a reminder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
And if we're going to keep if we have the results, the ones that it's a 1, but the ones that it's a larger number and there's a consequence that maybe they don't understand, might be nice to document that.
Okay, sure, I can do that.
But the burden on working parents resonates with me a lot too, and if we can be judicious about that, I think that'd be appreciated.
And there seems to be a lot of them. So,
Unless there's any comments or questions, I got my marching orders for that one.
Just a
We're
question.
going to table it or remove it, whatever the best procedure is.
I can, since there was no motion or second,
But it's consent calendar, so do we just remove it when we get to the consent calendar?
what I can do now is change it to a discussion item.
Okay.
Second item under my agenda is approval of a tuition student. Be it resolved upon my recommendation that Milena Ward be accepted as a tuition student at Strongsville High School for the remainder of the 23-24 school year per board policy at the rate of tuition set by the state. The annual rate of tuition is $13,949.39, and tuition will be paid from October 1st, 2023 through May 24th, 2024, representing 146 days for a prorated tuition amount of $11,441.63, plus any outstanding additional school fees. Any questions on that item? Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Bruckner for the business service report.
Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. The first item in this section is a revision for the supplemental bonds. So this is a revision to the agenda November 21st, 2023. The supplemental bonds revision to increase the renewal position bond for an additional price not to exceed $630 purchased through the Ohio School Boards Association. It says consent, so I can just move on. Correct, George?
Yeah, if there's no questions.
We had to increase the number of people on the bond and with their positions. So with that increase in positions and people, we had to increase the amount of purchase for the bonds. The second item is for the security cameras. Revision to the December 7th, 2023 security camera from the safety grant This revision is to increase the total number for an additional price not to exceed $95.20, purchased through Southeast Security. I will own this one. I just made a little bit of a clerical error and reversed a few numbers on some cameras. So when that was discovered, to keep the amount of cameras over the 130 and not have any more mistakes down the road, we have to increase that purchase order by $95.20, and I apologize to the board for that clerical error. The district insurance, this is a revision to the May 25th, 2023 agenda. The revision is to increase the district insurance renewal to include the mobile classroom located at Chapman Elementary for an additional price not to exceed $93. This is purchased through Liberty Mutual Insurance Company, and the agent is Todd and Associates. This, quite simply, when we had the item in May, we did not have the mobile classroom under the insurance policy. The insurance company had a few questions we still had to ask, but we wanted the rest of the district to be insured, obviously. So as those questions were answered, this is the amount that came up to insure the mobile trailer. So now the district, all the buildings, and the mobile unit are insured under the same policies. Rescind the purchase of a Ford truck. November 22nd, way back in 2022, you were gracious and voted on the purchase of a truck, an F Ford 350, in the amount of $59,585, and that was from the Permanent Improvement Fund. We still do not have that truck. We called the salesperson, and the response that we got was there's still supply chain issues, and we were not going to be able to get the truck that we had originally purchased, that they were going to increase because they were going to give us a newer model. I did not find that acceptable. We went out and did some shopping, and the results and the fruits of that labor will be in a future agenda item in just a few minutes. But we waited 2 years for the truck. We're still having issues with getting it. It wasn't even on the lot. So at this point, I think it's prudent to go ahead and rescind that purchase and then purchase an additional truck that you'll see here in just a few items. Bus bid awards. This is be resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that bus bids be accepted for 2 72-passenger conventional school bus chassis and bodies as received by the School Bus Cooperative Purchasing Program of the Ohio Schools Council, and it's listed in the exhibit. Be it further resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the bids be accepted from Hill International Trucks for 2 72-passenger conventional school bus chassis and bodies. Funding shall be as follows: 2 72-passenger conventional school bus chassis and bodies provided by permanent improvement funds, not to exceed the aggregate principal amount of $264,052. I'm sorry, $264,050. $264,052.00. Sorry about that.
Steve, how much was it again?
That would be $264,052 and 0 cents for those at home.
This one's an action item.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Hausum, second by Ms. Stavcek. Any discussion? I'm tempted to ask, but I won't.
Go ahead.
How much is it again?
I thought you were going to ask something else.
But I won't ask.
Okay.
No. Hearing no discussion, take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stochek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Cobain,
Yes.
and Mr. Micko.
Yes, and the motion carries.
Thank you. The last one is a purchase of a F-350 Ford truck. Be resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Board of Education approves the purchase of one 2024 Ford F-350 truck from Valley Truck Center, not to exceed the total quoted price of $54,565, funding to be from the Permanent Improvement Fund.
Do they have one?
Mm-hmm.
When do we get it?
Vote yes, and it will be here pretty quickly.
So the earlier one was from who?
That was from Harrison Ford. No, I'm sorry. I think it was Armstrong.
This is an action item as well.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Ms. Stavcek. Any discussion? Take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stochek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Ms. Cobain,
Yes.
Mr. Miko.
Yes, and the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Breckner. We have no items under curriculum or student services this evening, so I'll turn it over to Jenny for the human resource report.
Thank you. Under Human Resources this evening, I have the following items for your consideration. Under number 1, resignation for an administrative staff member. Under 2, appointment for administrative substitute. Under 3, an agreement related to the terms and conditions of employment. And under number 4, we
Jen,
have a,
stop. Number 3 is a separate.
oh, I'm sorry. I missed that. Number 3 requires a vote. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Board of Education authorizes the superintendent and treasurer to enter into an agreement impacting terms and conditions of employment, the terms of which have been reduced to writing and provided to the board.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Ms. Stavcek. Any discussion? Hearing none, would you please take the roll?
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stochek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Ms. Cobain,
Yes.
Mr. Miko.
Yes, and the motion carries.
And finally, under number 4, a memorandum of understanding, be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the memorandum of understanding between the Strongsville Board of Education and the Strongsville Education Association as stated in the exhibit be accepted. And that concludes my report.
Do we have any questions? Can we just get a update on what the MOU is?
Sure, the MOU goes back to what we talked about with the calendar. So the committee made a recommendation on parent-teacher conference days. That recommendation was made to me and Mike Scott. We agreed with the recommendations and reduced it to writing with, or put it in writing with the MOU. So this details when and how we're going to have parent-teacher conferences. Doesn't detail the days or the structure. It just says we will have one full day in the fall, a half-day evening in the fall, and a half-day evening in the wintertime. So it just memorializes that. It says that this will be in place for the next 2 years, which is our next calendar cycle. And if it works well, we can have the opportunity to continue on with it. If it doesn't work well, we have the opportunity to revise it.
Thank you.
We have nothing under technology, so that concludes my report.
Adoption of the consent calendar. I'm going to do it right this time. Adoption by the Board of Education and adoption of consent calendar at this point of the agenda means that all items appearing in the agenda denoted as type action consent, which constitute the consent calendar, are adopted by one single motion unless a member of the board or the superintendent requests otherwise. Do I have any otherwise? Any requests to remove? We will note for the record, we changed the calendar, just calendar from consent calendar
To discussion.
to discussion. Say that 5 times fast. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Ms. Stavcek. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Ms. Stochek,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Cobain,
Yes.
Mr. Miko.
Yes, and the motion carries. We have second reading on a number of board policies that are listed in the agenda. We will be voting on these at our January 25th meeting. Board of Education other, we have a policy discussion. I believe we have a slide to guide our discussion. So we do have 3 policies that the policy committee has discussed in the past. Because they were not necessarily routine, the policy committee recommended that they be brought forward to the board as a whole. So that's what we're doing today as part of our discussion other. And we have 3 proposed policies. The first one is policy 2425. Participation in district-sponsored clubs, activities, extracurricular activities, student government, intramural, and interscholastic athletics. Some of the background is, this is something that I proposed to reduce or eliminate cuts in any of our extracurriculars and to put a guideline of the spirit of what we as a district are attempting to accomplish. The highlights from my perspective is any activity that is, for example, athletic and OHSAA administers or manages it, our sports activities. Most of those are teams. Most of those, the OHSAA has guidelines on how many students can be on the team, whether it be basketball, whether it be volleyball, or what have you. So I would think from a policy standpoint, we certainly can't say, we're gonna have as many people as we want and then make it difficult or impossible to compete in high school athletics. But other activities, I think that, from my perspective, the spirit and the direction should be the more participation we can encourage, the more participation we can have, the more opportunities we can have for students, the better we are as a district. And so that, to me, is the heart of the policy, the idea that, as the adults, we want to put that message out that if you want to be on student council, if you want to be in the elementary running club, if you want to be in any of these activities, it's our job as a district to try to make it as many students as possible. Now, for me, the con is we all have children. I remember having younger children that, I want to I want to learn piano, and I want to learn drum, and I want to play basketball, and I want to play football, and I want to be on student council, and I want to be on the newspaper, and that's no good either. So I think in the policy talks about we need to have clear expectations, clear requirements, whatever the activity is, for both the parents and the students. But beyond that, if I have 11 students that are interested in activity, and in the past we would do 10, let's encourage the 11 and let's bring the 11 forward. So I hope I've described it enough. I'll open it up for any questions or comments.
I like the idea with student government of allowing more people if we can, but I think one of the biggest issues is having adult supervisors present for the ratio of students to adults that's something to consider of how we're gonna go through something like that. Or if it's a sport, for example, a competitive sport that maybe is an intramural, the understanding of you might be on the team, but you may not play actual minutes of game versus practicing or things like that.
That was my question. Do we have enough adults to cover more students?
And I think we've already, as a board, addressed those kinds of issues. And when we have a situation where we have more students, we'll have more coaches, more advisors, more what have you. And it'll always be a balancing act. If you have you normally have 10 and you have 11, do we need another person? But Jenny's really good with school classrooms at saying, when is one more too many and we need to split a classroom, or one more is too many and we need to consider an extra supplemental or an assistant coach or an assistant advisor. But I think we can balance those needs. So one of my concerns, or one of my suggestions is if the will of the board for this is to pursue it, let's push it to, let's have Cameron get the input of the high school, the middle school, and the grade schools and say, hey, what are the pitfalls, what are the pluses and minuses, so that we can consider it. And I'm leery of just, passing policies without making sure we understand the impact, but I think the spirit is there.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I would like is some more data, like how many different groups does this actually affect? Mm-hmm. How many people are we not allowing to participate currently, and do we have the staff then I would like to see some numbers. And to the extracurricular one, I think when we added those a couple years ago, there was the intention of having a follow-up discussion anyway, that if they went very well, we were gonna make adjustments and provide more opportunities. So I feel like that discussion is coming or should be coming anyway. So we can kind of tie that in.
Yeah. I think you have direction on that one?
The next one I'll provide some of the overview on. So as a policy committee, we've been talking and with the high school about their other surrounding districts and other districts have a drug testing of students policy. So, the background on this is, in a lot of areas and even at our own secondary level, we're seeing an increased use of THC with our students, unfortunately. And so we've been discussing a variety of ways that we could help our students through education, through counseling, through diversion programs. But, one of the thoughts is how can we provide our students that want to make the right choice with another opportunity to say no? And a student drug testing policy can do that. And this would be for students that are in sports, extracurriculars, or those that drive to school. So things that are considered privileges versus rights of free and appropriate public education. So we did link there, complete some research with other districts that has this policy and have implemented that policy, and the board has access to that. So some of the highlights of this is that this policy, conceptually, it would impact or be over middle school and high school students. So students, as I said, participating in athletics, extracurricular activities, and students that drive to school and park on school property would have to sign an informed consent agreement letting them know that they could be a part of random drug testing if you want to be a part of those activities. So again, this is an idea that if you fall into one of these groups, you're at the middle school or high school, the district would decide we are going to randomly drug test this many times a year. Every time we do that, we're going to randomly pull X amount of students' names to do that. And if your name is pulled, that you would participate in a random drug test that would be administered by a company the district would hire to provide that service. And then, so that would be kind of the procedural piece of it. So why would you have a drug testing program? Some of the things I've already mentioned, but to provide for the health and safety and general well-being of the students, to encourage them to remain drug-free, provide legitimate reasons for students to say no, and to encourage students who use drugs to participate in drug treatment programs. So what that means is we are not looking to catch kids, to suspend kids from school, have a negative academic consequence for it. But if there is a positive test, there wouldn't be any of those school consequences, or would there result in documentation in their student file about a positive drug test, and we wouldn't suspend or expel. What that would mean is there would be a consequence per our extracurricular athletic policy, which typically is 20% of the season, or parking permits revoked for a period of time in accordance with the Code of Conduct. So what we're trying to say is, how do we help our kids to make positive decisions? How do we address the fact of accessibility and use of THC and other substances amongst young people today? And how do we do it in a way that supports kids in making better choices and align those consequences to, to the extracurriculars that they're involved in? So there's a lot of complexity to something like this. But again, the policy committee said this is a bigger discussion than just the policy committee. So just as Richard said, for this policy, we're looking at, hey, is this something that we want further discussion, information? Is there a consensus among the board to continue to explore looking at a drug testing policy in the future, or not? So I'll turn it back over to Rich.
Does anyone like to start off?
Would this just be for athletes then, are we saying? Or, because
No, it
how
would.
do we randomly, do you know what I mean? Like if it's like the football team gets tested or the soccer team, I mean, how do we?
So in talking to other districts that have it, any student, as currently drafted for this policy, any student in grades 6 to 12 that it participates in a sport or is in an extracurricular like a club, or a co-curricular like marching band or things of that nature,
Right.
Or drives to school and has a parking pass, you would take all of those names and put them on a list. And then you would say, the company that you would use to provide this, you would say, okay, we want to test 50 kids. They would go through a randomizer, and they would pull out the 50 kids' names. So you may have 10 kids from sports, 10 kids from, extracurriculars,
Right,
a variety of
okay.
people. So that's how it works in practice. So there's kids that, in talking to other superintendents that have done this, the reality is you've got kids that can get their name pulled every time. You've got kids that can get their name pulled once a year, whatever, and everything in between.
Or some kids never get their
Yeah,
name pulled.
correct.
So,
So I'm supportive of us continuing the conversation. Again, I like the idea of saying, let's get high school feedback, not just from the principal, but from obviously the athletic directors, because I think this applies to them the most, but also from the guidance counselors and the high school teachers that are doing the other extracurriculars that would all be in the pool, so to speak.
yeah, because I think it's hard to cut off, is it every club, then drama club, and I don't know, they have after school.
And I mean, that's part of the policy discussion, because we're crafting the policy and deciding how we want to apply it. So I know,
Okay.
one thing is, and you help me where where I go off the rails, but we cannot legally have a drug testing policy for every student. The way the law works is you have the right to an education, et cetera. So you can't drug test everyone. We can't just say, hey, first day of class, every student line up and drug test. But we do have the ability for things that are considered voluntary, whether it be sports, whether
Right.
it be driving to school privileges, and again, that's where the details get real important. We can't drug test someone because you're 16 and you drive.
Right,
We can drug
right.
test someone because you've signed up for for driving privileges to school. Sports, any of these activities that are more of a voluntary choice.
Right.
The law says we can have a policy. I know for myself, recent events in Strongsville have made me realize that we do have a drug problem.
Right.
And I think it gave me pause. And to me, this is something that we definitely need to explore. It's incumbent on us to explore. Some of the what-if questions I have is, do we want a random drug test policy? I know other districts that if you play a sport, part of playing the sport is you will do a drug test, right?
So that
Those
would be drug
policies
testing everyone in that sport.
in all sports, in
No,
all,
but you were
correct.
right. But what I'm saying, it wouldn't be what Cameron said, we'll just pick out 50 people.
Yeah, and again, that's, how do we as a board and an administration and a high school and a middle school team want to craft our policy? But I'm aware of other school districts that it is every student has to submit's a terrible way to describe it, but has to do drug testing as part of playing the sport. The thing that I think is something to think about that to me has a lot of reasonableness is there are no, in those circumstances, there are no penalties if you have a positive test. It is a vehicle to say, parents, we now have to have a conversation, and students, you can't just say, well, here's your consequences, move on. It's, whatever that conversation is, however you get help for the student, whether it, similar to anything else, whether it's, a class, an education, or, depending on how bad the drug test is, it can be more tough love, I guess is the way I would describe it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I would like to consider all of those kinds of options. And what are the pluses and minuses?
I'm just thinking if the ultimate goal is, your ultimate goal is to help a child, so it's I would be for I would be for everyone in all the sports or whatever, instead of randomly. only because I'm thinking, and kids who are watching this will hate me, but I'm thinking, if a child tests more than once, you know, and they keep, like, if there's no penalty, like, we're not
There's
really
never-
helping anybody.
Yeah, it's not that there's never a penalty, but, you know, that first,
Right, the
the
first
first
time.
positive test, it's,
But if that same kid comes back like 2 weeks later and then I mean, I don't know how often would we even do this? Like, would it be like once a month or?
You select that. So all of that
Oh.
is to be selected.
and I think it's important for us to have the conversation. I think it's important for us to say, I mean, we have other districts, Cameron's already done the research, and you know, this is the way they crafted their policy, so what were the results? And for me, my goal is let's craft a policy that we think is going to have the best outcome, education, drug abuse reduction, et cetera. And sometimes you need a stick, and sometimes you need a push in the right direction. And the other thing I think it does is, and maybe this is Pollyannish, but kids who want to play sports now have another tool to say, hey, I'm saying no to the peer pressure because I'm not jeopardizing my opportunity to say sports
Well, yeah,
or
it
play
gives them an
sports.
out, you know.
So just so I'm clear on, I'll wait to next steps. I want to hear if there's anything else.
No, I'm interested in doing more with this policy, for sure.
So if we're comfortable, I think let's go to our experts at the high school and the Strongsville and the middle school levels and say, I'm sure they have the same thoughts and the same concerns. If you could design the ideal policy that you could get behind, what would it look like?
Gotcha.
Would it be beneficial to, in any way, get with the Strongsville police to see kind of like infractions that they're seeing as well, that maybe we're not aware of, the issues or the abundance of issues that they're seeing?
Great idea. And I'm sure our SROs probably have some evidence or some
I
information
think
to
it's
share.
pretty well
Yep.
documented. I hate to say it, but I think Strongsville is kind of on the map for that, for drugs. I do.
I think every community is.
Yeah,
Right?
but I think it's it's a problem.
You have your marching orders.
Go with that one. We have one more to discuss.
This is policy 8510 wellness. Do you want to lead the discussion, Michelle?
I can. A couple years ago, we adopted the policy that is there. It says every effort will be made to provide all students in grades K to 5 with a daily recess period of at least 15 minutes. Exceptions may be made per the approval of the superintendent designee. And at the time, I think the idea was to memorialize the fact that research has been pretty consistent for a number of years that recess is necessary and helpful for elementary age students, and to just kind of give a little bit of guide. I mean, there's a lot of wiggle room in this policy, but to kind of just say, hey, this is a value of the board and the district. And so the reason it's back up again was in the fall. I started hearing rumblings from parents at various buildings, so this wasn't an isolated incident, that maybe this was not fresh on the minds of the administrators or the teachers. And I asked Cameron to do a little more digging and to bring it to this board so we could kind of revisit it if we wanted to make the language any stronger or just talk about it in any way. He has the results here. We've looked at them. My opinion after seeing the results is it seems like it's being implemented about as well as it can be. There may be some pockets, and you're going to get that with anything. I don't have so much concern now that we've done the legwork, but here it is for discussion if anyone has anything else they want to add. Otherwise, it'll just stay as it is, which was the original policy.
I'm glad it's here because I think it's important that parents know that, you know, recess Obviously, it's something that we all have our opinions on, but it's important that we have it, and it's important that parents realize that it is not just some part of our day, it is an important part of our day, and I would suggest if parents have any opinions on this, let the board know, let their teacher know, let their principal know. I know Cameron loves recess, let Cameron know, and then we'll go from there. But I think as long as the spirit of it is being implemented well, and obviously, we want to know we can't have 4 hours of recess a day, as much as our children might want it, and we can't have no recess ever. And as long as we have a healthy balance, I think we're in a good place.
Those were all the policies for discussion, if there's no other comments on that last one.
Next on our agenda is more Board of Education other. Do we have any miscellaneous public information?
I have one. The Strongsville High School Wind Ensemble has been competitively selected as one of only 4 high school bands in the state of Ohio to perform at the Ohio Music Education Association Professional Conference in Columbus on February 1st. And this, I want to say, is only the 4th time that this has happened one of...
Like 19 something.
1984? Yes, so the only other time Strongsville High School's band was selected was in 1984, when Ken Mihalko was the director. So if anyone's in Columbus on February 1st or wants to make plans to take some PTO to head out there, that'll be happening.
Haley, you reminded me of one other thing. Tomorrow afternoon at the middle school, we're hosting a wrestling meet. And I love what they're doing, and they're turning into like an all-school event, most of the school event anyway, where the 7th and 8th graders are going to get to watch due to space limitations. They had to choose. But this wrestling team apparently is fantastic. They haven't lost, and I believe they're live streaming it. So if you're interested in checking it out and seeing these kids, they've been very successful. Try to continue their streak. It's tomorrow at 1:30.
And I had a late confirmation that, yes, it will be live streamed.
Single camera live stream on our box test.
Excellent.
Is it the middle school kids or the wrestlers?
And then the intermission is going to be Cameron and George wrestling.
I got him with his leg.
George is a disadvantage. All he has to do is kick you with his boots.
that's right.
I will add to that, there's going to be a similar event for the high school. I'm not sure the exact date, but it's a Friday during the day as well, for the high school as well.
So they actually have other teams come in during school? I guess I'm confused.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's one more done yet.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's coming, so it's just like a dual meet.
And they started during school?
Must be, yeah.
Oh,
It must be recess.
I've never heard of that. So
Yeah,
it's something
me
The
neither.
new.
idea started,
Okay.
the high school did it, was a visitor at another school last year that did it, so I think they're carrying the idea for us to have a home event as well.
Oh, okay. Well,
We shouldn't lose a chance to compliment the girls varsity and boys varsity basketball team. They are outstanding this year. And I don't remember, did they beat Medina?
The boys did, the girls did not.
Well, the boys beat Medina, so congratulations to them, but make sure to see them while they're hot.
Yeah.
If I could just add real quick, the athletic boosters are having their ninth of races February 3rd at Mashad's, which is now owned by the Aviator Club. Tickets are available on their website.
Any others? Hearing none, we do have reason for executive session on the topics of
To consider employment of a public employee, to consider matters required to be kept confidential by federal law or regulations or state statutes, and to prepare for and review negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Oh, sorry.
Second?
Wow.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by a very eager Mrs. Cobain. Any
That was
discussion?
intense.
Hearing none, please take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Mrs. Cobain,
Yes.
Mr. Miko,
Yes.
Ms. Stochek,
Yes.
and Mrs. Bissell.
Motion carries. We will enter into executive session at 8:45. We have no expectation of further business. Thank you for your attention, and Happy New Year.